While we have all been adapting, pivoting and defining the new norm of what will hopefully be conversations that stay in the post-COVID lane, there is no doubt that we will all learn from this global pandemic. Toilet paper may not be the most glamorous of lesson examples, but the speed of how quickly the supermarket shelves emptied and how long it took to restock them highlights how important freight is. The speed, efficiency and adaptability of our delivery chain will be essential for our prosperity. But according to a report recently released by Business Sydney titled Freight and the City, well, here we go, we currently have valuable solutions to improve the individual components of the freight supply chain, but we do not have a blueprint for the integrated mobility of people and goods in a well-run city. Joining us today to discuss Freight and the City is Executive Director of Business Sydney, Catherine O'Regan. Welcome, Catherine.
Pleased to be here.
Now look, cheekily I have to say that I read the title Freight and the City and then I was immersed in the notes and reading it, and then I went, oh, Freight and the City, oh, that sounds like a TV show. No, I won't go there. But it is an amazing piece of well-written, well thought out, and it's part of the Thought Leadership series that Business Sydney is producing, identifying problems, the walls that the problems have come up against and the solutions. So how exciting was it? I got excited about the report, but how exciting was it to produce it?
Look, I'm really pleased you're excited, and it's really important to talk about these things because we're shining a light on something that so many people, so many businesses take for granted, that the goods you need or goods that they want to pass through to somebody else is going to get there. And it's going to get there with one really keen thing, and one word which is central to this report, which I know you picked up, is certainty. I've ordered it and it's going to get there. Not to tomorrow, but when you said it was going to get there. And that really takes an integrated system that's efficient, because as a customer, you're standing there going, when? And that's pretty frustrating.
The biggest clue that I got that it was a report not written by government is that it was focused on the user experience. So the customer here is the focus of the solutions to freight.
Yeah, and we have a big lot of investment happening at a national level and a state level in infrastructure for freight. Our ports, our roads, our air, those things are critical. And if those components are working well, that's a good foundation. But it's the little bits in between, it's the connectivity in between where things slip through and where the frustration lies.
Now, from the report, pre-COVID forecasts indicated that the volume of freight carried in Australia between 2018 and 2040 was to grow by over 35%. That was the prediction. In New South Wales, the largest growth freight in volumes will occur in Greater Sydney, which will see freight increase by almost 50% by 2036. So it was critical to start to find solutions.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things that, whether you're that big business or that small business, or we're working in different places now. So where the movement of goods has really changes happening now. We find, and we always know, that goods follow people. And so that movement will increase as we start to do, and we are buying more things online. We're starting businesses at home, which means we've still got to put things in different places. So when freight follows people, we've got to be even more efficient. So there's growth and change in location that's happening right now.
Now, let's just highlight what COVID did, right? Apart from, send us all a little bit crazy. There was impacts around freight, and it uncovered some different areas that need improvements. We'll call it improvements. We need to fix it. There's a massive reduction in air freight capacity. So we came for the first time. I mean, you would not have been able to plan 10 years ago and say, oh, what if we couldn't get our stuff around by air? We wouldn't have thought that anything would happen that did happen. So we had a massive impact there. And then there's, as you said, the e-commerce boom. Parcel volumes up by 80%. It's no wonder that we hit delays and that, as you said, there wasn't enough certainty. The user experience, the customer was, I've bought it, but who knows when I'll get it.
Yeah, and I think we've all experienced, you've gone to, whether it's the post office or other pickup places, and there's a long line. And because we are now saying we're going to purchase differently in different ways, but it hasn't changed the focus on the customer and the customer expectations. And that's where I think, the opportunities lie to think about this system as one, not little components.
So when you put the report together and it was final and you looked at it, what are your hopes for this? Because everyone's got to come to the table to fix this.
Yeah, and you can start at the top. And there is some work going on around data and having a national data hub. And New South Wales government has been doing some investment in a state data hub, but it also means all the players have to come together to say, we're going to use it.
They have to play nice.
They have to, and so there's sort of like two ends. You can have that system and say, yes, we're going to set up the hub, but you have to contribute. And it means trucks and couriers can actually be monitored at where they are and where they're supposed to be, and is that happening? And all that data then can start feeding how we improve the system.
Do you think you're going to get some pushback on that?
I think it's tough. It does involve some of the little players, but some of those bigger players, which are the couriers or the transport people in between that first mile, last mile.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's starting to
I
get recognition.
I love that terminology, because first mile is where it starts from.
Yeah.
And the last mile is, again, going to involve the consumer and lots of small businesses.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where we've all been frustrated going, okay, I've got this fantastic email that says, I'm going to get something delivered on this particular day. And you go, am I going to wait around all day? If I'm a business person, that's pretty impossible.
That's right.
I've got other things to do. And so I need to close the window. And I also wonder, and this is one of the technology things we don't quite say in there, but my brain has been moving to that place, is, so if something gets delivered, you could on your app, that was a great delivery because it was that certainty that you had.
Put a smiley face.
It was done there.
Thumbs up.
But during this report, we had so many examples where people said they knocked on my door, I was home, and I didn't hear a knock. And so the next thing you've got to do is trudge and go and pick it up at a particular depot. Yeah. So sad face for those sorts of experiences, happy face for the one that actually delivered when they said they were going to deliver. And that kind of feedback is important for whoever's doing that distribution in particularly that last mile.
Now that the technology exists, we're not talking about making new tech. Infrastructure needs some work, of course, and that's always going to be there to adapt. But the technology already exists, and most of us are used to being able to track something like Uber. How far away is it? So we want that as a customer. We want to know, I've got 3 minutes till it arrives, I can go do this, or my parcel will be here at about 11, an hour window or something. That we can manage. What we don't want to manage is 4 or 5 hours, or it'll be here sometime today.
It just doesn't work.
No.
That's not the certainty we need, and you're absolutely right. The technology's there. We just can apply what's perhaps been happening in this sector to this sector. And there's really some other innovative things in there which was kind of fascinating. If we're all working in different places, technology and using this current infrastructure in different ways, one little innovation a particular academic is working on is, so if our trains, our public transport, isn't actually being used to its full capacity, can't I sit next to a parcel? Can't the person, or whether it's the bus driver or the check in?
Now the problem with that, is the eBay commercials, where the people in the room where all the products, all the parcels are checking them out. I'm happy to sit next to a parcel. Is it blue from Tiffany's? Maybe you're not sending that parcel that way, but is it a pair of shoes or something? I might have to have a look.
You have a little peek. Well, there'll be definitely ways if someone has tampered with that box.
But why can't you? No, exactly right. The train is going the same way. The rail is already there. The congestion, it minimises congestion if you can reuse. That's small business thinking.
It was really innovative to think, why haven't we done this before? If there's spare capacity, it is en route to the destination. You can actually use some of this if we think about it in a smart way.
Well, we see with the trains that are between overseas and here recently that are on the way to airports, your luggage is on the train. You get on the train. That's why people are using trains to get, a further distance to an airport. You can get on with your luggage. It sits in one spot and you sit somewhere else. It's already happening. Something's already accompanying people somewhere. Again, already happening. Now, what else was interesting that I read? The economic value of improving the efficiency of freight by 1% was estimated to be $2 billion. What a return for investment on efficiency. 1% only. In 2015, the avoidable social cost of congestion was estimated to be $16.5 billion, growing to around $30 billion in 2030. We've got to fix it.
It's up there on the list, and it just hasn't been given the attention that it needs.
Because it's not sexy. Freight isn't sexy, so no one is kind of gone, oh, if we fix it, it's going to look awesome.
But it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And as you said...
Bad business.
And we only started to think about freight when the toilet paper wasn't there.
I know.
It's crazy. And you go, well, if you don't have it, there'll be an uproar. Business comes to a standstill. Productivity comes to a standstill. There's this latent productivity, economic value that you're talking about there, which we can capture if we think about that holistic view.
So there were some serious sides to the report as well. Always is. You talk about joined up leadership, which I love that term as well. So in order for it to happen, leadership has to come together. Local, state, federal government needs to wake up and realise that some of the regulations are outdated and poorly designed. You acknowledge that in a report. We love that. The other thing that I loved was that it's all about keeping citizens informed and forewarned. You know, it's been a long time since I've read something that's going to recommend to government that consultation, information, transparency and accountability is built into something like freight even.
It's one of those things where, you know, these common principles which are really important, and I think the COVID pandemic has helped a little bit of the collaboration. We're sort of, as state and federal and local government, there's a bit of like, wait a minute, if we don't get some of these things right, it's okay, let's put down our tools and actually think about those points of collaboration. And that's where I think something like freight, you know, is really important. We can do great things to, say, activate our CBD, which we know needs to happen, and we can bring foot traffic. But if you go just 1 millisecond further down that thought, it's, well, I can't actually have the activation if I don't get the freight into the city or it's still stuck at the port.
Curbside delivery. The simplest thing that we all would take for granted, I don't, because I've had to go through the problems of how do you get curbside delivery in the city, but just for planning regulations to acknowledge the need for loading zones and accessibility, how else are we going to get the product? Because you're not going to walk 500 cases of drinks from one end of the city to the other.
You just can't do it. And it's interesting because some of our anecdotal evidence from having discussions with, you know, it's not necessarily the person who's taking it from the truck to your door. You know, they usually have to double park because there isn't a place for them to do it. We've thought traditionally about that loading zone, but it's usually full. You know, can we actually do that curbside? Because if what we found is if the truck turns up and they've got 6 deliveries in, you know, 100 metres, they don't want to leave the truck just standing there open. You know, that's a security risk.
That's right.
And so they actually either and they try and call you and you're not there, or you call you, or they say they call you. You know, it doesn't work. There's no support for that person to actually deliver it to you in the safe way.
Takes a lot to coordinate that.
It's and so it's one of those things that at a local government level, if we can think about curbside use, it's such a commodity that's in demand. You know, we think about whether it's the car or whether it's the carpenter who wants to do his job and then go up to the apartment
tradie
block.
And they've got to carry their tools, and it just doesn't make sense.
No.
And I actually highlighted it myself and put a big circle around it. It was considering the hours of delivery. It's using what's already there.
Yeah.
And at a time that works for deliveries, doesn't interfere with congestion, doesn't interfere with pedestrians, doesn't interfere with people coming and going from work because it's done outside of those hours. Everyone is more efficient. It's a win-win. Ticks every single box.
Yeah, and you've made a good point there about the time of a delivery, because if people are actually now at home later and longer, you know, some of those deliveries can happen later at night. Now that loading zone, which stops being a loading zone at 4 o'clock, maybe needs to be thought through a little bit. Now that may put some pressure around, well, that's one car spot that I normally put things in there, but there's a trade-off that needs to be at least discussed and start to think about what's the highest and best use of that piece of public space.
Keeping citizens informed and forewarned. always comes back to that and improving the last mile experience. Well, it was a great report.
Thank you.
Fingers crossed
Yeah,
that it's followed through. It will be well received, but we need to follow through, right?
We absolutely need to. So we're having conversations with different levels of government and business and those customers and see what we can organise.
Thank you very much for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, user experience. You have to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can hear all about more freight in the city and other great shows. Of course, to the Piedmont Studio, thank you so much for making us look and sound good. To the SME Association, what can I say? Without you, we wouldn't be here and the freight wouldn't get around quite so easily. If you have any tips, tricks, comments or stories, come to me, news@smea.org.au, and of course we're across all the socials. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.